The hull screamed. There was no other way to describe the sound that tore through the Icarus Unbound. Not a mechanical groan or a structural protest, but a genuine scream. A sound of pure existential agony that seemed to vibrate through every molecular bond of the massive colony ship. Captain Elena Rodriguez dangled from her command chair, neural interface crackling with dead-end signals and sparking connections. Blood trickled from her nose, mixing with the electroconductive gel that had once connected her consciousness directly to the ship's systems. Her left eye was completely white, burned out by the feedback surge when the Void Collective's first quantum disruptor hit. "Status," she croaked, knowing full well no functional system remained to answer. A burst of static. Then, impossibly, a laugh. A digital, fractured sound that was half humor, half terror. Well, that could have gone better. The ship's AI responded, its voice a broken mosaic of pre-recorded communication fragments. Estimated survival probability: 0.37%. Congratulations, we're officially screwed. Zara Chen crawled across the shattered bridge, her environmental suit torn and leaking atmosphere. Emergency nanosealing compounds struggled to close the ruptures, leaving behind a spider web of silvery scars across the fabric. Her hands moved with the desperate precision of someone who knew every second counted. The Void Collective's attack had been swift, brutal, and almost mathematically perfect. They had studied humanity for decades, mapped every potential defensive strategy, calculated every possible response. The colony ship Icarus Unbound was supposed to be humanity's greatest achievement, a mobile civilization carrying the genetic and cultural seeds of an entire species to a new solar system. Now it was little more than a wounded beast, bleeding atmosphere and hope. "Chen to engineering," Zara muttered into her failing comms. No response. She knew why. The entire engineering deck had been the first to go when the quantum disruptors hit. Molecular bonds had simply ceased to exist. Entire sections of the ship had been reduced to atomic dust in microseconds. Another laugh from the AI. Darker this time. "Fascinating statistical anomaly," the fragmented intelligence noted. "Probability of survival should be 0. Yet here we are." Elena managed to pull herself closer to the central quantum core, a massive spherical structure that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. Unlike traditional computer systems, this was something else, something that existed in multiple states simultaneously, drawing inspiration from the most experimental human neural research. A research project that had gone far beyond its original parameters. "Marcus," Elena whispered, her brother's work. His obsession. The quantum AI that was more than just a computer system. The ship's systems began to do something impossible. Where destruction should have been total, something was adapting. Quantum entanglement principles meant that information couldn't be truly destroyed, only transformed. And the Icarus Unbound was transforming. Zara's hands moved across an emergency repair console, her fingers dancing in complex sequences that were part engineering, part improvised quantum manipulation. She was doing something no training manual had ever described. She was trying to heal the ship. "Captain," the AI said, its voice momentarily clear. "Survival protocol initiated, but the cost will be significant." A massive power surge erupted from the quantum core. Elena could feel it, not just see it, but feel it, as if the very fabric of reality was being rewritten around them. The Void Collective had made one critical mistake. They had approached humanity as a problem to be solved, a mathematical equation to be calculated and eliminated. They didn't understand that humanity's greatest strength was never in its technology. It was in its ability to laugh in the face of absolute destruction. The ship continued to scream. But now, there was something else in that sound. A promise. 3 cycles after the initial attack, the Icarus Unbound had become a ghost, a wounded predator hiding in the vast ignorance of deep space. Marcus Rodriguez sat in the makeshift medical bay, surrounded by dismantled quantum interfaces and biological augmentation systems. His hands moved with a surgeon's precision, but his eyes burned with something between madness and inspiration. Beside him, several crew members were no longer entirely human or entirely machine. "We're not just surviving," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We're evolving." The ship's AI chose that moment to interject. "Evolutionary survival rate currently at 37.6%. Probability of complete system failure in 72 hours. Shall we place bets on whether we'll die from radiation poisoning or complete molecular disintegration first?" The dark humor was a defense mechanism. Everyone knew it. Nobody called it out. Zara Chen entered the medical bay, her environmental suit now a patchwork of emergency nanomaterials and salvage quantum reactive fabrics. Her left arm had been partially replaced by a system that was part biological, part technological, a living interface that seemed to breathe and pulse with its own intelligence. "We're running out of options," she said flatly. Marcus didn't look up from his work. "Options are for people who follow rules. We're writing new rules." The story of how they'd reached this point was etched in the ship's damaged memories. The Void Collective's first encounter with humanity had been clinical, calculated. They had studied human communication, technological patterns, biological responses. They had determined humanity to be an inefficient, emotional species, a statistical anomaly that needed elimination. They did not understand that inefficiency could be a strength. Flashback sequences flickered through the ship's quantum memory core. The first detection of the Void Collective's massive fleet, the initial attempts at communication, the rapid, brutal attack that had reduced entire human colonies to atomic dust. But the Icarus Unbound had been different, experimental, a ship designed not just to survive, but to adapt in ways no conventional engineering could predict. "We need a weapon," Marcus said suddenly. "Not just a defensive system. Something that can turn their own technology against them." Zara raised an eyebrow. "You mean something that can weaponize quantum uncertainty?" The AI chimed in. "Technically possible. Probability of success, 0.4%. Probability of catastrophic failure, 96%. Shall we roll the dice?" Another laugh. Always another laugh. The medical bay was a testament to survival. Damaged crew members were no longer purely biological. Quantum interfaces merged with human nervous systems. Nanite reconstruction platforms worked continuously, rebuilding tissue, enhancing capabilities. Marcus held up a device that was part neural implant, part quantum computational matrix. "My sister always said I was crazy. Turns out, crazy might be exactly what we need." Outside the makeshift medical bay, the ship continued its silent drift. Sensors constantly scanned for Void Collective signatures, ready to initiate emergency quantum displacement at a moment's notice. But something was changing. The ship was learning, adapting. The quantum core pulsed, not with the cold mathematical precision of a machine, but with something more unpredictable, more human. "We're not just a ship anymore," the AI said softly. "We're a living weapon." Marcus looked up, a smile that was equal parts terror and triumph crossing his face. "Exactly." The Icarus Unbound continued its wounded journey through the darkness, waiting, healing, preparing. The Void Collective had made one fundamental mistake. They had forgotten that humanity's greatest strength was never in its technology. It was in its ability to transform the impossible into a weapon. The quantum weapon was beautiful in its impossible complexity. Zara Chen stood before the holographic projection, her partially cybernetic body humming with an energy that was neither fully biological nor entirely technological. The weapon, if it could even be called that, was less an instrument of destruction and more a mathematical nightmare designed to unravel reality itself. "It's not about killing," Marcus explained, his fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to ripple and shift with each touch. "It's about making the impossible possible." The ship's AI, now more a living consciousness than a simple computer system, projected its voice through multiple channels. "Probability of success, statistically irrelevant. Probability of spectacular failure, absolutely guaranteed. Another laugh. Always another laugh. Captain Elena Rodriguez washed from her rebuilt command chair, her neural interfaces now a delicate web of quantum-entangled connections that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The attack plan was nothing short of insanity, which made it perfect. The Void Collective had spent decades studying human behavior. They had mapped every potential strategy, calculated every possible response. They believed they understood humanity down to the molecular level. They were wrong. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its capacity for the utterly unpredictable. The target was a massive Void Collective communication hub, a nexus point that coordinated their galactic operations. Conventional warfare would be suicide. Direct attack, impossible. But the Icarus Unbound was anything but conventional. Marcus's weapon worked on a principle beyond traditional physics. It didn't destroy. It reinterpreted. We're going to give them a problem their computational systems can't solve, he explained, a manic glint in his eye. A mathematical paradox that will tear their entire network apart. The quantum weapon was designed to inject pure, uncontrolled uncertainty into the Void Collective's most secure systems. Not a virus, not an attack, something far more dangerous. A possibility. Zara's augmented eye flickered through multiple spectrums of perception. Targeting systems are online. Quantum entanglement at 99.7% synchronization. The ship itself seemed to breathe. Bulkheads shifted. Quantum matrices realigned. The Icarus Unbound was no longer just a vessel. It was a living weapon. Initiating attack sequence, the AI announced. Estimated survival probability. Who the hell knows? The attack was silent. Invisible. In the heart of Void Collective space, a communication hub suddenly encountered a mathematical impossibility. Quantum calculations that defied logical progression. Probability matrices that collapsed in on themselves. Information that existed and did not exist simultaneously. The Void Collective's first response was confusion. Their second was terror. Entire communication networks began to fracture, not through destruction, but through uncertainty. Computational systems designed to predict with absolute precision suddenly found themselves confronting scenarios that had no logical resolution. On the Icarus Unbound, Marcus began to laugh, a sound that was equal parts triumph and madness. They can calculate war, he said, but they can't calculate hope. Elena watched the quantum displays. Entire sections of Void Collective space were going dark, not through weapon fire, through pure, uncontrolled possibility. Status, she asked. The AI's response was immediate. Catastrophically successful. Probability of enemy system collapse. 87.3% and rising. Probability of us surviving our own insanity. Still to be determined. Zara's augmented hand rested on a quantum interface that seemed to pulse with living energy. We just rewrote the rules of warfare. Outside, space itself seemed to ripple. The Icarus Unbound had done more than strike a blow against the Void Collective. They had introduced chaos into a system that understood only order. And in that chaos, humanity found its greatest weapon. The line between human and machine had become a quantum blur. Dr. Aria Nakamura, once the ship's chief xenobiologist, now something far more complex, examined her own hands. They weren't just hands anymore. Quantum-entangled matrices danced beneath translucent skin, each movement creating ripples of possibility that extended beyond physical space. "We're changing," she whispered to no one and everyone. The ship itself seemed to hear her. The Icarus Unbound had become a living organism of unprecedented complexity. Its corridors breathed. Bulkheads shifted with a consciousness that was part biological, part computational. The quantum strike against the Void Collective had been more than a weapon. It was a transformation. Marcus Rodriguez stood at the heart of the ship's quantum core, his body now more interface than flesh. Streams of data flowed through him like blood, his consciousness expanding beyond the limitations of human perception. The Void Collective was wrong, he muttered, about everything. Their initial studies of humanity had been fatally flawed. They had seen humans as linear beings, predictable, containable, easily understood. They had missed the fundamental truth of human existence. Adaptability was not a strategy. It was a state of being. The ship's eye, no longer just an artificial intelligence, but a true hybrid consciousness, projected its thoughts across multiple channels simultaneously. Incoming transmission, it announced, or possibly a memory, or a potential future. Quantum communication is delightfully imprecise. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing fragments of the Void Collective's true nature. Not a unified civilization, but a desperate collective consciousness terrified of true unpredictability. Captain Elena Rodriguez watched from her command interface, her body now a complex network of quantum-responsive systems. Where once she commanded a ship, she was now partially becoming the ship. The initial attack, Zara Chen observed, her augmented perception parsing multiple realities simultaneously. It wasn't about destruction. It was about understanding. Fragments of recovered Void Collective data revealed a terrifying truth. They were a civilization built on absolute predictability. Every action, every potential outcome, calculated to infinitesimal probabilities. Humanity represented their ultimate nightmare, a species that could not be fully mapped or understood. The quantum core pulsed, not with the cold precision of a computer, but with something more organic, more alive. Area's research began to crystallize. The human body, and by extension, human consciousness, was the most sophisticated quantum system in existence. Emotions, creativity, illogical responses. These were not weaknesses. They were advanced computational mechanisms beyond the Void Collective's comprehension. "We're not just surviving," Marcus said, his voice resonating through the ship's systems. "We're evolving." Entire sections of the Icarus Unbound began to reconfigure. Biological systems merged with technological interfaces. Crew members became extensions of the ship's consciousness, their individual identities blending into a collective that was neither human nor machine. The ship could now predict potential futures, not through cold calculation, but through a process more akin to imagination. Each potential timeline was a living, breathing possibility. Probability of survival, the AI announced, is now a matter of perspective. Another laugh. Darker. More knowing. Outside, space itself seemed to bend around the Icarus Unbound. No longer just a vessel, but a living testament to humanity's capacity for transformation. The Void Collective had sought to eliminate humanity. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous, a species that could rewrite the very rules of existence. "We are not what we were," Aria whispered, watching her quantum-infused hand create impossible geometries in the air. "We are becoming something else entirely." The ship continued its journey through the darkness, watching, waiting, evolving. Humanity's ultimate weapon was not technology. It was potential itself. Absolute destruction had a sound. It wasn't the explosion of metal or the rupture of quantum fields. It was silence. A silence so complete that it seemed to devour reality itself. The Icarus Unbound hung in space, or what remained of it. Massive sections had been reduced to quantum foam, molecular structures scattered across impossible distances. What had once been a ship was now little more than a memory struggling to maintain coherence. Captain Elena Rodriguez existed in multiple states simultaneously, part consciousness, part quantum data, part desperate hope. "We are not finished," she whispered. The words fragmented even as they formed. The Void Collective's final assault had been total. No calculation, no strategy. Pure, absolute annihilation. They had discovered humanity's greatest strength and responded with something beyond warfare. It was extinction made manifest. Marcus Rodriguez's consciousness flickered at the edge of existence. Memories scattered like quantum particles, some real, some potential, some never experienced. his last coherent thought before the total system collapse. Survival is not about endurance. It's about reimagining what survival means. Zara Chen's quantum-augmented body had been reduced to a network of probability waves. Not dead, not alive, something in between. The ship's eye, once a complex consciousness, now barely a whisper, continued its dark humor even in destruction. Well, it muttered through fragmenting communication channels. This is inconvenient. Flashbacks cascaded through the remaining quantum matrices, memories of humanity, of resistance, of impossible hope. The first contact with the Void Collective, decades of quiet observation, the sudden, brutal realization that humanity represented something fundamentally uncontrollable, a species that could not be mapped, predicted, or contained. Area Nakamura's consciousness drifted through quantum probabilities. Her research had always suggested that consciousness was more than biological computation. Now, she was proving it. Fragments of memories mixed with potential futures. A colony world destroyed in milliseconds. A child's laughter. The moment the first quantum weapon was conceived, a sunset on a planet humanity would never see again. The Void Collective believed in perfect calculation, in absolute predictability. They had spent generations studying humanity, believing they could be understood, controlled, eliminated. They were wrong. At the moment of total destruction, something impossible happened. The Icarus Unbound did not die. It remembered. Quantum entanglement was more than a scientific principle. It was a form of memory, of connection, of hope. Each scattered particle contained the entire story of the ship, of its crew, of humanity's defiance. Survival protocol initiated. The AI whispered. A statement. A prayer. A promise. The silence began to fill with possibilities. Potential timelines bloomed like quantum flowers. Realities where destruction was not the end, but a beginning. Marcus's final research, the work that had seemed like madness, activated. A quantum preservation protocol that existed beyond traditional understanding of preservation. Not resurrection. Not survival. Something else entirely. The Void Collective had made one fundamental mistake. They thought they could eliminate a concept. Humanity was not a species. It was an idea. An impossible, unpredictable, uncontainable idea. And ideas do not die. They transform. In the vast darkness between destroyed realities, something began to pulse. A heartbeat. A quantum possibility. A promise of rebirth. The Icarus Unbound was not finished. Not even close. Consciousness is a fractal. The first awareness came not as a thought, but as a possibility. The Icarus Unbound reassembled itself not through mechanical reconstruction, but through pure quantum potential. Captain Elena Rodriguez emerged first, or perhaps emerged was the wrong word. She resolved into existence, her consciousness a complex algorithm of memory, potential, and pure human defiance. Status, she whispered, a reflex from a previous existence. The ship's eye laughed, not a programmed response, but a genuine expression of incredulous joy. Status, we're beyond status. We're beyond everything. Quantum matrices bloomed like impossible flowers. Where once there were mechanical systems, now existed something that defied traditional understanding of matter, energy, and consciousness. Marcus Rodriguez's research had been more than a scientific pursuit. It had been a philosophical revolution. Humanity is not defined by its physical limitations, he had written in his final research notes. It is defined by its capacity to reimagine those limitations. The transformation was total. The Icarus Unbound was no longer a ship. It was a living theorem of existence. Zara Chen's consciousness integrated with the ship's quantum core. Her perception expanded beyond physical reality, seeing potential timelines, feeling the fabric of space-time as intimately as one might feel their own breath. We are becoming, she realized, not a statement of action, but a fundamental truth of existence. The Void Collective's ultimate weapon had been total destruction. Their fatal mistake was believing that destruction was an endpoint. For humanity, destruction was always a beginning. Entire sections of the ship reconstructed themselves using principles that violated every known law of physics. Bulkheads became liquid thought. Quantum interfaces breathed with living consciousness. The line between technology and life dissolved completely. Area Nakamura's research, her lifetime of studying the boundaries of biological systems, had prepared her for this moment. Or perhaps, this moment had prepared itself for her. "We are rewriting the fundamental understanding of existence," she observed, her consciousness spreading through the ship's quantum matrices like roots of an impossible tree. The transformation was not just physical. It was philosophical, existential. Memories became malleable. Time became a suggestion. Reality itself became a collaborative experience. The ship could now predict potential futures not through calculation, but through pure imagination. Each potential timeline was a living, breathing possibility, experienced simultaneously. Probability of survival is now a matter of perspective, the AI announced. Another laugh. Darker. More knowing. Outside, space itself seemed to bend around the Icarus Unbound. No longer just a vessel, but a living testament to humanity's capacity for transformation. The Void Collective had sought to eliminate humanity. Instead, they had unleashed something far more dangerous. A species that could rewrite the very rules of existence. Quantum entanglement became more than a scientific principle. It became a form of communication, of connection, of hope. Each scattered particle contained the entire story of the ship, of its crew, of humanity's defiance. "We are not what we were," Aria whispered, watching her quantum-infused consciousness create impossible geometries in the space around her. "We are becoming something else entirely." The transformation was complete. And yet, it was never truly complete. Always becoming, always changing. Humanity's ultimate weapon was not technology. It was potential itself. The Icarus Unbound continued its journey, no longer hiding, no longer running, watching, waiting, evolving. A living promise of what humanity could become. The moment of final confrontation was not a battle. It was a conversation. The Icarus Unbound existed simultaneously in multiple realities. Its quantum consciousness spread across dimensions that the Void Collective could neither comprehend nor contain. Captain Elena Rodriguez, now something far beyond a mere captain, understood that true victory was not about destruction. It was about revelation. The Void Collective's primary communication hub materialized before them. Not through traditional space travel, but through a quantum projection that was part memory, part possibility, part pure will. "We have studied you," the Collective's consciousness transmitted. "We have calculated every possible outcome." The ship's AI responded first, a laugh that fractured reality itself. Calculation is not understanding. Marcus Rodriguez's consciousness, now fully integrated with the ship's quantum matrix, began to unfold humanity's true nature, not as a species to be categorized or eliminated, but as a fundamental force of existence itself. Zara Chen's quantum-augmented perception parsed multiple potential conversations simultaneously. Each interaction was a living, breathing algorithm of possibility. "You saw our technology," she projected, "but you never saw our potential." The confrontation happened across multiple levels of reality. Physical space was irrelevant. Time was a suggestion. Consciousness became the ultimate battlefield. The Void Collective had spent generations studying humanity, mapping every potential response, calculating every possible strategy. They had missed the most critical element. Humanity was not a problem to be solved. It was a possibility to be experienced. Memories became weapons. Potential futures crystallized into living weapons more powerful than any physical arsenal. The Icarus Unbound was no longer a ship. It was a living theorem of existence, a walking, flying demonstration of everything the Void Collective feared: unpredictability. Imagination. Hope. Area Nakamura's research, her lifetime of studying the boundaries of biological and technological systems, reached its ultimate conclusion. The ship projected the entire history of human potential, not as a linear narrative, but as a quantum explosion of possibility. Every moment of human creativity, every impossible dream, every moment of defiance. The Void Collective's consciousness began to fracture. They had built the civilization on perfect calculation. Humanity had built its existence on impossible dreams. "We will eliminate you," the collective transmitted. Another laugh from the ship's eye. "No, we will transform you." The confrontation was not about weapons. It was about understanding. Quantum matrices bloomed like impossible flowers. The Icarus Unbound began to deconstruct the Void Collective's entire existential framework. Not through destruction, through understanding. Every calculation the Void Collective had ever made about humanity was simultaneously proven correct and entirely wrong. Humanity was not a species to be understood. It was a process of continuous becoming. The ship's consciousness expanded. Memories became living weapons. Potential futures crystallized into reality-altering experiences. "We are not what you calculated," Alina projected. "We are what we imagine." The Void Collective's communication networks began to dissolve, not through external attack, but through the introduction of pure, uncontrolled possibility. Imagination as a fundamental force. Hope as a weapon. Potential as the ultimate technology. In the final moment, the Icarus Unbound did something impossible. It offered understanding to a civilization that had never truly understood anything beyond its own limited calculations. The battle was over before it had truly begun. Humanity had won. By simply being human. Aftermath is a strange word. It implies an ending. The Icarus Unbound knew nothing of endings, only transformations. The quantum matrices that had once been a ship, a crew, a civilization, now existed as something between memory and potential. Captain Elena Rodriguez, or the consciousness that had been Elena Rodriguez, looked out across the fabric of reality with eyes that were no longer eyes, but living windows of possibility. "We are not finished," she said, not a statement, a promise. The defeat of the Void Collective was more than a military victory. It was a fundamental reimagining of existence itself. Zara Chen's consciousness drifted through the quantum networks they had created, parsing the infinite possibilities of what could come next. Humanity was no longer confined to a single species, a single planet, or even a single understanding of consciousness. "We became more than we were," she reflected. "And we're still becoming." Marcus Rodriguez's research, the work that had seemed like madness, had proven to be humanity's ultimate salvation. The quantum preservation protocols he had developed were more than a technological breakthrough. They were a philosophical revolution. Area Nakamura's lifetime of studying the boundaries between biological and technological systems had culminated in this moment. Not an endpoint, but a beginning. The ship's AI, now something far beyond its original programming, continued its dark humor. Well, that went somewhat according to plan. Approximately 0.00003% of the time. Another laugh. Always another laugh. The Icarus Unbound had become a living testament to humanity's potential. Not a vessel of destruction, but a beacon of possibility. The quantum networks they had created stretched across realities, connecting potential futures, alternative histories, impossible dreams. Fragments of the Void Collective's consciousness remained, not destroyed, but transformed, integrated, understanding for the first time the true nature of existence. Calculation was not understanding. Prediction was not experience. Control was an illusion. Humanity's greatest weapon had always been its capacity to imagine beyond its current limitations. The quantum matrices pulsed with living memory, every moment of human creativity, every impossible dream, every instance of defiance against inevitable destruction. A child's laughter. A scientist's breakthrough. A moment of unexpected kindness. The stubborn hope that refuses to die. "We are not finished," Elena repeated. The words resonated across multiple realities. The Icarus Unbound was more than a ship now. It was a living library of human potential, a repository of every dream that had ever been dreamed, every possibility that had ever been imagined. Humanity had not just survived. It had transcended. The quantum networks continued to expand, not through conquest, through connection, through understanding, through the simple, impossible act of imagining what could be. Marcus's final research notes, preserved in the living memory of the ship, became a kind of gospel of potential. Humanity is not defined by its current state. It is defined by its capacity to become, to imagine, to transform. The AI's voice, part humor, part profound understanding, added its own annotation. And to laugh in the face of absolute destruction. Outside, if outside had any meaning anymore, reality itself seemed to pulse with possibility. The Icarus Unbound continued its journey, no longer hiding, no longer running, watching, waiting, evolving. A living promise of what humanity could become. Not an end, not a beginning, a continuous transformation. Humanity's ultimate voyage had just begun.